Hi, I am Gwen Raimondi. For those who don't know me, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of Washington in the US. And this is the third video in a series I'm doing on trauma. And in the first one, I talked about the different types of trauma, um, lived experience trauma, intergenerational and ancestral traumas, and cultural relational trauma. In the second, I talked a bit about the physiological impacts of trauma and why it is so important that our medical and mental health professionals be trauma informed, as well as our body workers, be that massage therapists, um, chiropractors, acupuncturists, etc. And today I am talking about, in the essay that I wrote that goes with this video, I wrote about the psychological and emotional impacts of trauma and how our bodies and minds are deeply connected, how that while trauma does live in our bodies and it can show up in a variety of ways physically, and medically, it also impacts our moods and it impacts our mental health and can show up as depression, anxiety, uh, post traumatic stress, um, illogical fears, uh, irritability, moodiness, inability to self regulate. All of these things can show up as. As we have trauma living within us that we are unable to or have not yet processed. And so part of how trauma shows up is in the ways that we interact in the world. One of the things that trauma has us do is isolate ourselves and really distance ourselves from other people, from our communities, from our world. It has us really being in a very narrow mindset of only being able to trust ourselves, and even then, not really trusting ourselves, and not allowing us to have deep and meaningful relationships with other people, which really messes with us because human beings, we have a need for belonging and we have a need for community and we have a need for relationship. This is a basic human need. This is not a weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is a reality that we are a social species and we need each other to survive. So when trauma has us isolating, it's actually impacting our ability to survive in the world. Our culture would tell us something very different, right? Our culture tells us that we have to be independent and individual and autonomous and all of these things. And while I don't disagree with that as a general statement, I absolutely agree that we need to have autonomy, that we need to be our own person. We also need to be interconnected with those around us. And when trauma tells us that we have to isolate and we can't be with other people and we can't trust other people and we can't have deep relationship with other people, that impacts not only our mental health, but it starts to impact our physical health too, because our bodies and minds deeply connected. So how this shows up, how this can show up, is in very unconscious or subconscious ways. We may we may find that we are really easy to anger, or that we are really very easily irritated with other people, that we in some ways feel that we're superior, that other people are stupid, other people don't understand, other people aren't as good at, whatever the thing is. And so we just have to do it ourselves. And that isolating, right, is a response to trauma. It is a protection mechanism. It is a response to not being able to trust people who were probably supposed to be our caregivers, right? Especially when we're talking about childhood trauma and the impacts of physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, even something as, in some ways, out of the parental control as poverty, right? We still are looking to our caregivers to care for us. And when they are unable to, because there simply are not enough resources to do that, then that also impacts us and impacts our ability to trust that other people can care for us. So, right, all of this unconscious motivation and all of this unconscious trauma, right, that shows up in conscious thought of, I don't need other people are dumb, nobody else can do it as good as me, I can do this all by myself, I can take care of myself, I can't trust other people, sort of so on and so forth, actually comes from, right, that conscious thought is coming from the unconscious or subconscious motivation from our trauma histories. So, as part of trauma processing and doing embodiment work, there's also the piece that is cognitive, that is about really getting to know ourselves and to start to get curious and ask ourselves, well, why do I think that I can't trust this person, right? Why do I think that only I can wash the dishes the right way, right? Why is that? What does that come from? And getting curious and starting to unravel the reality that other people can do the dishes just as well as I can, right? Or other people may do the dishes differently than I do, but the end result is just the same and just as good, right? And I'm using dishes as, it could be anything, right? But usually it is something as very bizarre and innocuous as doing the dishes, right? Um, so once we start to unravel that, once we start to get curious about ourselves and ask those questions, we can then start to really get into our bodies and ask our bodies those questions and get to know where this stuff is coming from and what it really looks and feels like in our bodies, and um, how does that impact the way we are in the world, and how is that impacting our relationships and our ability to feel fulfilled, to feel pleasure, to feel connected, to feel nourished, to feel cared for, and to have that sense of belonging. I've shared before and will probably share many times again, and will be talking about in the trauma informed embodiment course that I'm offering, about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how, and also the Blackfoot tribe's hierarchy of needs, and how this sense of belonging is a need, and how when we don't have that, we can't really do this other work, right? And that sense of belonging and that interconnectedness can can have us doing really damaging things for ourselves and our community because we want to belong and we're just belonging with people who are harmful. um, and it can also have us doing really amazing, powerful things of transforming community, creating hope, creating new ways of being in the world, right? So, as we do this work, right, and as we start to get curious, and as we consider what is the real motivation here, am I really that much smarter than everyone else in the world? Probably not, right? Certainly some people have higher intellectual intelligence than others. Some people have higher emotional intelligence than others, right? All of that is true. We all have different experiences. And no matter how smart we think we are, there's almost always someone who's smarter, right? So, where does this idea that I can't trust someone else to do whatever the thing is come from, right? What is that? What is that deeper thing? What is that history? What is that trauma that that grew this idea that I have to do everything myself? And that's just one way trauma shows up, right? But that is an isolation. That is an act of isolation. That is an act of isolating and not relying on community and not relying on others to get our needs met. This is different from what I'm talking about is different from totally relying on others to meet all of our needs, right? Of course, we need to be able to meet some of our needs because that is part of being human. We need to be able to be autonomous. We need to be able to self soothe. We need to be able to understand ourselves and our motivations and to get some of our own needs met through our own doing. Absolutely. And because we are social beings, because we have a need for belonging, we also need to be able to trust others and to be able to rely on others that when we can't get our needs met ourselves, we can trust that someone else can help us with that. And we can trust that we can also help others with getting some of their needs met when they are unable to do it themselves. So that is just a bit about the kind of unconscious, subconscious piece of trauma and how it isolates us and how processing it can definitely help us in unraveling that and in finding our sense of belonging and finding community and trusting in our interconnectedness. There'll be one more video and I hope you enjoy it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see there's a few links below in the description. One of them is the link to the essay that I wrote that goes with this. And then there's also a link to the trauma-informed embodiment course that I'm offering that begins February 1st. And there's also a sexual trauma support group that I'm offering that will begin February 1st also. So I hope to connect with you soon. Thanks.